Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're donning a trench coat and fedora and heading to the heart of New England in Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC. In case you missed any of the previous episodes in the Philosophy and Ethics series, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down this and other games, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Returning from our vacation to Nuka World in the last episode, and dropping the kid off at home, we tune our Pip-Boy to the Valentine Detective Agency Radio to hear a request for assistance being broadcast out by Nick Valentine's assistant Ellie. It sounds pretty important, though she doesn't share any details in the transmission. So after clearing out our inventory, we head to Diamond City to check in at the agency. It turns out a fisherman by the name of Kenji Nakano, a former acquaintance of Nick's, reached out for help with something. And after partnering up with Nick, we make our way to the northeast corner of the map to visit the Nakano residence. Kenji and his wife Rei are beside themselves with worry as we arrive because their daughter Kasumi has run off without any indication of where she could have gone. Kenji is convinced Kasumi was lured away by a kidnapper of some kind with ill intentions, and Rei thinks the girl may have struck out on her own as she was apparently the adventurous type. After a little snooping around in her room and workshop, we discover the truth may be some weird mixture of the two. It turns out Kasumi loved to tinker with electronic devices, a hobby she and her grandfather shared. One of the projects she was working on was a radio, and with a little effort she was able to not only get it working, but also increase the broadcast range to the point where she was able to contact a settlement of synths up north near a town called Far Harbor. By itself, that might not be too much, but apparently whoever she was talking to got her thinking about her own identity and questioning whether she herself might be a synth. She couldn't live with the mystery, so she stole one of her dad's boats and sailed off into the night in search of this synth settlement. Thankfully, Kenji has a second boat with a built-in navigation system that somehow knows exactly where we need to go. And before long, we're setting sail toward the murky waters of Far Harbor. As we pull up to the docks of the small coastal town, we can hear an argument between a couple of the residents. One of them turns out to be the de facto leader of Far Harbor, a woman by the name of Captain Avery. She's accompanied by a man named Alan, who will wind up being a thorn in our side throughout our stay on the island. Avery is a little wary of us as they don't get a ton of strangers on the island, but she's able to confirm Kasumi passed through the town. Any more information will have to wait though, as we're introduced to the thing that makes Far Harbor an incredibly difficult place to live: the fog. The island is covered in a radioactive fog that hides horrors unlike anything we've seen in our travels to this point. The town is forced to rally to the wall that they've built to keep out the worst of the worst, and after what I can only assume is a typical evening in Far Harbor, we reconvene with Avery and Alan to learn that in addition to Far Harbor, there are two other communities of note on the island. The first is a collection of religious zealots known as the Children of Adam. We've come into contact with members of this group back on the mainland a couple of times, and though they're a little odd, they've not really been too much of a menace to this point. The other is the settlement of synths that we came here looking for. They're situated in a spot known as Acadia, and Avery makes a point of telling us we're going to need a guide to make it there safely. She points us in the direction of a man named Old Longfellow and asks that we lend a hand around town if we're able, as the people of Far Harbor could use a lot of help. So, to start with, we'll talk a little bit about Alan and his hatred for the children of Adam, because his mindset isn't really an uncommon one even in our world. See, the radioactive fog we talked about a minute ago has been getting worse in the past few years on the island, and several people in Far Harbor, led by Alan, blame the children of Adam as the rise in radioactivity in the fog seems to line up with their arrival. According to Avery, there is no hard evidence to support the idea that the children are behind the worsening fog, and this is where we can dig into correlation and causation. Correlation just means that two or more things appear to be related in some way, and causation means that one thing directly causes another. In this instance, the fog getting worse is correlated with the children of Adam settling on the island. But the two things being correlated does not mean that one is the cause of the other. In order to prove the children of Adam were causing the problem with the fog, there would need to be some other factor. See, the children themselves are most likely not spewing radiation out of their orifices, meaning that for them to be responsible, we would need to show that they had some device or other mechanism that was actively boosting the fog and making it more radioactive. To this point, that burden of proof has not been met, and yet Alan is quick to jump to them as the cause. We see this in our own world when people jump to conclusions about things that are negatively, or even positively, impacting their lives. They'll blame other groups of people, companies, and even imaginary or unproven causes like ghosts or demons for their woes, even when there is no evidence those things are actually the cause of their problems. As an example, suppose there was an economic downturn that made everyday necessities like food more expensive, while also causing companies to lay people off to save money. The actual causes of this downturn might be complex and include things like supply chain disruptions, lower demand for goods and services, and a shift in policies put in place by local, state, or federal agencies. Let's say that just before this downturn, a large influx of immigrants came into a local area, bringing with them an increase in the size of the workforce and a small amount of capital that helps them establish new businesses or to drive up demand at already established companies. Some people might notice that the increase in the immigrant population correlated with the economic downturn and assign blame to that group because those two things are related. This is easier than admitting that the situation is more complex and gives people a simple, straightforward boogeyman to blame for their problems. And this is what Alan has fallen into with the children of Adam. They're an easy scapegoat, a place to aim his frustration and give him a feeling of some control. If the solution to the problem with the fog is just to take out the children of Adam, then all Alan needs to do is convince enough people and get it done. Will that actually fix things? There's no way to know without more information. But when people are desperate, they make rash decisions and don't always do the right thing. Besides Alan and Avery, there are several other members of the community that we can assist before we make our way to Acadia. The Mariner is in charge of the community's defenses, specifically the wall that keeps the bad things out. She was apparently maintaining the dock before anyone else showed up, and the majority of the harbormen in Far Harbor are nothing more than squatters in her eyes. They were forced to seek refuge in the harbor when the fog pushed its way through the island and ruined their former homes, and they all seem pretty happy to let someone else manage the defenses for them.
Why doesn't anyone help you?
Each harborman is the captain of his own ship, worked fine for generations on the homesteads. Your land, your rules. But when the island pushed them onto my dock, one by one, the ungrateful bastards expect me to look after my land, even though they're squatting on it, like wretches.
And this idea of self-reliance, kicked up to a toxic extreme, is another point of contention that we'll see come up quite a bit here in Far Harbor. Many members of the community put a lot of stock in the idea of relying on themselves rather than others, and especially over accepting the help of those deemed as outsiders. Alan was the first big example of this, as he called us out for helping with the defenses of the wall rather than thanking us, because in his eyes, accepting help from outsiders risks becoming dependent on them, leaving the community high and dry when the outsider isn't around. And there is some merit in the idea of being self-sufficient. Knowing how to handle yourself and being able to provide your own food, shelter, and protection can be very valuable, especially in the case of something like the fall of society after a nuclear apocalypse. But there is a fine line between being self-sufficient and being stubborn. It is possible to accept the help of outsiders while also maintaining your own community. And doing so can even be beneficial if that outsider has some valuable skill that can help improve the odds of long-term survival. It's also smart to build and foster long-term relationships with individuals and groups outside of your own, as those relationships can sometimes mean the difference between life and death. What if some terrible tragedy, a natural disaster, or in the case of Far Harbor, a monster attack, befalls the town, and having close connections outside of their walls is the only thing standing between them living or dying? Seeking or accepting help isn't a weakness, it's a sign of strength. It shows that you know when to reach out and accept something that is going to benefit you and those that rely on you. After a short conversation, the mariner asks us to retrieve a specialized set of tools from a place called Eagle's Cove Tannery. That sounds easy enough, and we'll jot it down on the list of things to do as we explore the island. Some of the residents aren't opposed to asking for help, though. The doctor, a man named Teddy, is willing to let us help heal a patient that doesn't seem to have a very good chance of survival after spending too much time in the fog. We need a high enough intelligence level or the medic perk to do any good, but after taking a look, I was able to stabilize him and save his life. Then there's Cassie Dalton, a storyteller with a tragic family history and a flair for the dramatic. She'll send us on several missions to different places around the island, giving us access to our own property in the process. But the bulk of her tale deserves its own video at some point. Heading into the town's bar, a little shack called The Last Plank, we can find old Longfellow hanging out alone in a corner. At first, he says he can't really help us, that he's more or less retired from helping people traverse the fog. But with a little convincing, he opens up and agrees to take us where we need to go, so long as we do exactly as he says the whole time. The trek isn't overly difficult, and we even run into a member of the Children of Adam along the way, learning that they don't really like Acadia because the Synths there are responsible for the fog condensers that keep Far Harbor safe from the fog. This is one of those bits that reveals enough about the children to tell me they aren't really a group I'm going to like. It's one thing to have your own personal religious beliefs, to follow specific customs and traditions that might seem odd to outsiders. But it's another thing to expect others to follow your chosen path. The Children of Adam expect everyone to bathe in Adam's holy glow, to accept the radiation, and to not try to push back the fog. This is infringing on the rights of others and is a mark against them in my ledger. But a deeper look at the Children of Adam will have to wait just a few moments as we finally reach Acadia and meet the leader of the Synth commune, DiMA. There is a lot to unpack in this initial meeting with what appears to be a very early Synth prototype. For one thing, he's pretty much convinced that everyone is a Synth, and for another, he claims to be what amounts to a brother to Nick. From what DiMA says, he and Nick were the only two of their kind created, with DiMA being the first and Nick being the slightly more advanced second. The Institute supposedly cycled a number of personalities through Nick over time, with him having no memory of that or DiMA because it happened over a century prior. It's a lot to take in for Nick, and something that will come up again. DiMA also confirms that Kasumi is alive and well, and tells us that we can see her after a short conversation where he reveals that he seems to have some kind of obsession with giving people identity crises. See, DiMA, at his core, is a cult leader. He brings in outsiders by acting as if he is only asking basic questions, even when those questions don't make a lot of sense. He plants the idea in the mind of an individual that they are a synth, And then lets the fact that there is no way to tell the difference between a synth and a human do the rest of the work for him. For people who are going through a difficult time, like Kasumi after the death of her grandfather, this kind of manipulation can be especially effective as it burrows into their already fragile emotional state and makes them doubt the things that they think they know. He tries this emotional manipulation on the sole survivor character as well, asking a leading question.
I don't mean to question you, but what's the first memory you have?
And then pouncing on the answer as some kind of evidence that the personality we have was implanted in us by an outside force like the Institute. He says that since we can't reference memories earlier than the day the bombs fell, that we might be a synth, though he also covers all his bases by following up with other explanations like trauma, disease, and background radiation as possible causes for memory issues. But the seed has already been planted. For someone who's dealing with the emotional kind of things that we've gone through, losing our spouse, and then dealing with the lost time and possible death of our son, as well as all the other things the wasteland has thrown at us, we could very easily be in a state of mind that would be primed to fall for these kind of tactics. He's careful to only lead us through inquiry, though. He doesn't make the direct assertion that we are a synth, only that it is something to consider, while also telling us that he can provide a safe community for us if we decide that we belong there. And that kind of indirect manipulation gives DiMA some plausible deniability, as he can say that those who call Acadia home made their own choice, even as he was in the shadows of that decision. It also makes it harder to recognize the deception, as the people he is manipulating are convinced they did all the work to discover that they were a synth. His questioning disguises his true intention, and makes him seem like nothing more than a curious, helpful individual that did nothing more than offer a warm bed to a synth in need. And this whole thing highlights another major problem with the Railroad of all factions. See, DiMA mentions that some of the synths in Acadia were runaways from the Institute that they rescued before the coursers could get to them, and others are the victims of mind wipes that had their true identity revealed to them by the group in Acadia. Mind wipes performed by the Railroad. Now, we've already discussed how unethical the Railroad is in general, and how their tendency to wipe the minds of the synths they've captured is a horrible thing. And this just adds to that case. It's one thing to rescue synths that know they are synths and keep them safe. It's something else to wipe their mind and stick a new identity in their head so they don't know where they came from. How many synths exist without knowing that they are synths? But more importantly, how many people out there are questioning the possibility that they could be a synth, and does it truly matter if they are one or not? If a synth has DNA like a human being and is indistinguishable from a human while it's alive, then what difference does it make if someone is a synth or a human? One argument I've seen, specifically around Paladin Danse when I talked about him and the Brotherhood of Steel, is that synths can be sleeper agents in organizations that are just waiting to be triggered with a single key phrase that makes them do things like go berserk or otherwise threaten whatever group they're a part of. While this can seem like a scary threat, it is really a red herring. First of all, the Brotherhood only knew about Danse thanks to a hack into the Institute's systems by the sole survivor, meaning otherwise they wouldn't have figured out that he was a synth, and leaving the threat of him being some kind of sleeper agent intact. The bigger issue here, though, is that we have to now presume that anyone in the Brotherhood could be a sleeper agent through that logic. So, what if we get rid of Danse? Now we have to worry about who else might just be waiting in the wings for the right word or phrase to bring them into the open. There's also the threat of human spies to contend with, as that is more viable overall than the threat of a synth, since there are more humans in the world, and as there would presumably be several groups that would like to bring the Brotherhood down from the inside who don't have access to that technology. So no, it doesn't make any difference at all if the individual we are dealing with is a synth or a human. Either way, they can be a friend, a threat, an innocent, or someone with ill intent, with synths being no more likely than humans to fit in any of those categories. And that brings us back to Kasumi, because once we've finished up with DiMA, we can find her tinkering on something in one of the lower levels of Acadia. She's a little surprised that we came all this way to track her down, and she isn't willing to return to her parents just yet. She's convinced beyond a doubt that she's a synth, and doesn't see Kenji and Rei as her parents, as she thinks the real version of their daughter was kidnapped and killed. But even with that, she is open to the idea of returning to them if we can help her figure out what's going on with Acadia first. She's become suspicious of DiMA after seeing some plans for the destruction of the other settlements on the island, complete with death count projections. Her big worry is that DiMA is planning to wipe out Far Harbor and the children of Adam and take over the island for himself and the synths, and she can't leave until she knows the truth and stops a possible tragedy from occurring. A little digging in terminals reveals that when DiMA first came to the island, he was staying in an old nuclear-armed submarine. As an older, less advanced model of synth, he was having trouble storing data, as his hardware wasn't really up to the task of storing years' worth of experiences and information. So, he developed a way to offload that data to an external system, something similar to what we see in Acadia. When the children of Adam showed up, DiMA wound up befriending their leader, a man named Confessor Martin, and he gifted the submarine that he'd been calling home to them as a base when he founded Acadia. The memory bank that he'd built up was too big to move, so he left it on the submarine under the careful watch of Confessor Martin. But Martin disappeared at some point, and the new leader of the children, a High Confessor Tectus, isn't as friendly toward the synths. DiMA and his fellow founders are worried that Tectus will find a way to access the old memories that he left behind and uncover some secret that could escalate the tensions on the island considerably. They've created a program that will allow someone to access and retrieve the memories, but they don't really have anyone that they can send to carry out the task at the moment. And that's where we come in after another conversation with Kasumi. Making our way to the home of the children of Adam, called the Nucleus, we have a couple of options for accessing DiMA's memories. Since I don't mind a little extra work, I take the more difficult path of joining their ranks through a spirit quest where I drink some water from an irradiated spring and follow a shadow across the island before returning victorious and becoming the newest member of the Children of Adam. After all, what kind of detective story would this be if we didn't go undercover? With Adam's blessing upon us, we get permission from Tectus to access the area where DiMA's memories are stored. There are a few traps and obstacles to overcome before we reach the database, but before long, we're digging through what I can only assume is everyone's favorite part of this DLC. There are several memories to retrieve, using some interesting mechanics, and what we uncover doesn't look good for DiMA. An extremely long story short, DiMA has some big secrets that he's been keeping. He did something he regretted involving Far Harbor, discovered the location of the key to blow up the nuclear bomb in the nucleus, created a kill switch for the fog condensers keeping Far Harbor safe, and had a falling out with Nick that we get the chance to hear for ourselves. There's a lot there, but I want to really focus on the key for the nuclear bomb and the secret DiMA has in regards to Far Harbor. First, the key to the bomb is our key to helping the Children of Adam achieve that ultimate goal they all strive for: division. Recovering it from the hiding place that DiMA discovered, we only need a little bit of persuasion to convince Tectus that launching it is in the best interest of the children. Thanking them for their hospitality, we turn the key and leave the sub just in time to watch it explode, dealing with one problem on the island before moving on to the others. And let's face it, the children of Adam were never going to be content with sharing the island with any group that didn't embrace the fog. And if they got enough nerve, they might just take out the condensers and doom Far Harbor for good. Once that's been dealt with, we head over to the Vim factory to dig up DiMA's biggest secret. And when I say dig up, I mean literally dig it up from under a pile of dirt in the basement. It turns out that at some point in the past, DiMA decided the best way to bring peace between the groups on the island would be to replace the leader of one of them with a synth. His buddy Martin with the Children of Adam was already friendly, so he would wind up killing and replacing the leader of Far Harbor, Avery. Now, set aside the fact that killing and replacing people is straight out of the Institute's playbook for just a minute, because even without that, this action is completely unhinged, and about the worst thing he could have done, short of just wiping the groups out. There's already a high level of mistrust between the groups on the island. What exactly did DiMA think would be the outcome if Far Harbor found out what he'd done? After reporting back to Kasumi, we confront DiMA with what we know, and we have a decision to make. DiMA does his best to justify his actions, though there really is no justification. Then he shares his intention to continue to sweep the whole affair under the rug. He says that if the people of Far Harbor knew what he'd done, they'd come after Acadia after killing him, and keeping it a secret somehow protects the synths. But in reality, the whole thing is just a ticking time bomb. For one thing, what if Avery dies and the next person to take over is hostile toward Acadia? Is he going to replace them too? Where does it end if he isn't able to negotiate peace in a more suitable way? And what if someone from Far Harbor discovers the truth inadvertently? With tensions being what they are, and with people like Alan in the group, that could start an all-out war anyway. That's not even bringing up the biggest hole in the plan. Something that I don't think I've ever heard brought up, but something that needs to be discussed. DiMA is willing to kill to keep the peace, and the fact that we know his little secret that could bring the island to its knees makes us a liability. What if DiMA calculates the risk of us being alive is too great because we might decide one day that the information is just too much to hold on to and tell someone in Far Harbor? What's stopping him from sending someone to kill the sole survivor? This is a very real threat and something we need to consider when deciding what to do with DiMA. He tries hard to make the case for keeping the secret, even going as far as to say that his coming clean will lead to the fog condensers eventually breaking down, as the people of Far Harbor will destroy Acadia after killing him. But that is something that will have to be dealt with if and when the time comes. The good news here is that we have a lot of sway in the matter thanks to the side quests I did for the denizens of Far Harbor while working to solve the mystery. We were able to ingratiate ourselves with the locals by not only assisting the mariner, the doctor, and Cassie Dalton, but also running some errands for a girl called Small Bertha, Mitch the bartender, and one or two others along the way.
See the hull? That's thanks to the mainlander, a true friend of the harbor.
You going to listen to Alan's hate-mongering? You even remember who did the captain's dance?
Mainlander cleared my farm, avenged my family. More than the rest of you ever did for me.
What's Alan really ever done? Caused trouble. Remember who cleared the lumber mill? Remember who's given us a new chance to take back our island?
My uncle's safe and alive. The strangers always steered us right.
Alan reacts to DiMA's confession, as you might expect, with calls to burn Acadia to the ground and kill all the synths. But thanks to the goodwill that we've built up, he's quickly shouted down, and we finally get to tell him to shut the hell up.
Every time you open your damn mouth, Alan, the whole town suffers. Shut up.
What?
For the crime of murder, DiMA is sentenced to death and executed right there on the pier, and the island can finally start to move forward. The children of Adam won't be an issue anymore, and Acadia will continue to stand as a beacon for synths and possible synths. But one of those possible synths is going home. Taking one more trip to Acadia, we convince Kasumi to embrace whoever she might be and recognize that she's still the daughter of her parents, regardless of her status as a synth. Coming full circle, we return Kasumi to Ray and Kenji and bring closure to another case with the Valentine Detective Agency. Considering it was our first case, we should probably retire at this point and hold on to that 100% solve rate. But if we aren't going to work as a detective in the Commonwealth, what other job could we possibly do? A new distress call on the Pip-Boy might just provide the answer we're looking for in the form of a request for assistance at Vault 88. And next week, we'll be discovering the secrets of that vault as well as the others Vault-Tec built or started in the Commonwealth, while finding ways to make the experiments they were conducting a little more ethical. To make sure you don't miss out on that and other videos here on Lost in Games, make sure you hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to help fund the construction of Vault 88 and the scientific experiments within, you can join as a channel member here on YouTube or head over and become a patron on Patreon. Members and patrons get cool perks like early access, their name on the screen, and more, while helping me keep the channel going. That's all I've got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.